The dinner table was full, but I felt completely alone. Everyone was dressed nicely, the food was expensive, and the mood was supposed to be warm. Instead, there was tension sitting right beside me. Lauren looked confident, relaxed, almost proud. I didn't understand why at first. As the conversation moved around the table, she suddenly turned toward me. Her smile was sharp. She made a comment about work, then another. At first, I thought she was joking. Then I realized she wasn't. She talked about how hard she worked, how much pressure she carried, and how some people at the table didn't really contribute. Her eyes stayed on me the whole time. Someone laughed. Another person nodded. No one defended me. Lauren kept going. She talked about money, about responsibility, about how exhausting it is to support someone who doesn't bring enough to the table. Her tone was calm, like she was stating facts. It hurt more than shouting ever could. I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't interrupt her. I didn't want to make a scene. Her parents avoided eye contact. Her brother smirked into his drink. I suddenly understood something painful. This wasn't a slip. This wasn't an accident. She wanted this moment. She wanted me to feel small in front of everyone who mattered to her. My hands were shaking under the table. I stared at my plate, pretending to listen. Inside, my heart was pounding so loud I thought someone might hear it. Years of patience, support, and silence pressed down on me all at once. I reached into my pocket without thinking and pulled out my phone. No one noticed. They were too busy listening to her. I opened an app one rarely looked at in public. The screen lit up softly in my palm. In that moment, something inside me changed. Not anger. Not revenge. Just clarity. I realized the problem was never my worth. It was that I had stayed quiet for too long around people who had already decided who I was. I locked my phone, slid it back into my pocket, and kept sitting there. But I wasn't the same man I had been when the dinner started. Lauren and I didn't start out this way. When we first met, life was heavy for both of us. We were young, tired, and unsure of where we were going. She had big dreams but no stability yet. I had a steady routine and just enough money to get by. We leaned on each other because we had no one else. In those early years, I helped wherever I could. I paid more of the rent when her hours were cut. I covered groceries when her paycheck didn't stretch far enough. When she came home frustrated and doubting herself, I listened. I reminded her why she was capable and why her goals mattered. I never kept score. I thought that's what partnership meant. As time passed, her career began to take off. Promotions came, then better offers. I was proud of her. I celebrated every win like it was my own. At the same time, my life stayed mostly the same. I didn't chase titles or big raises. I was comfortable where I was, and I believed stability had value too. That's when small things started to change. Her words became sharper. Compliments turned into comparisons. Jokes started to land a little too close to the truth. She would correct me in front of others or question my decisions like I needed guidance. I brushed it off, telling myself she was stressed or tired. Slowly, the balance shifted. Money became the measure of everything. Decisions were made without me. My opinions mattered less. She spoke with confidence, and I responded with caution. I didn't realize I was shrinking to keep the peace. I told myself this was normal, that couples go through phases. I believed love meant adapting. But somewhere along the way, support turned into expectation, and respect turned into judgment. She stopped seeing me as her equal and started seeing me as someone who benefited from her success. I didn't notice the moment it fully changed. There was no argument, no single event. Just a quiet shift where I was no longer standing beside her, but slightly behind. And by the time I understood what was happening, that distance had already become part of who we were. At home, things felt different. The warmth we once had was gone, replaced by silence and short answers. Lauren was always busy, always tired, and always distant. When we talked, it felt like she was somewhere else, already done with the conversation before it began. Money became a daily issue. She wanted to know where every dollar went. Small purchases were questioned. If I bought something for myself, she asked if it was necessary. If I suggested a plan, she reminded me how expensive things were. It felt less like a conversation and more like an audit. She also started comparing me to other men. Not directly at first, but enough for me to notice. She talked about co-workers' husbands, friends who were doing well, men who were ambitious and driven. Each comment landed quietly, but they stayed with me. I began to hear her voice even when she wasn't speaking. I tried harder. I took on more around the house. I stayed quiet during disagreements. I avoided topics that might lead to criticism. I told myself that if I just kept things smooth, we would find our way back. But the more I gave, the less I felt seen. There were nights we sat in the same room without speaking. She scrolled on her phone while I watched the clock. When I tried to share something important, she brushed it off or changed the subject. I stopped bringing things up altogether. I started doubting myself. I questioned my choices, my pace, even my value. I wondered if I really was falling behind, if I had misunderstood what it meant to be enough. The person who once believed in me now looked at me like a problem to manage. Looking back, the dinner didn't come out of nowhere. It was the final result of months of distance, control, and quiet disappointment. By then, I was already used to feeling invisible. The only difference was that night, everyone else finally saw it too. There was something about me that no one at that table knew, not even Lauren. It wasn't because I was hiding it to gain an advantage. I kept it private because my past taught me to be careful. I grew up watching money disappear overnight. Promises were made and broken. Stability was never guaranteed. When I started earning, I made a quiet decision. I would live below my means and plan for the long term. I learned how to invest slowly and patiently. I didn't chase fast wins or show results. I focused on consistency. Over the years, those choices added up. I never talked about it because money had always caused problems in my family. It changed how people treated each other. I didn't want that kind of attention or pressure in my marriage. I believed love worked better without numbers attached to it. So I kept things separate. My account stayed in my name. My savings grew quietly. I paid my share of life and never asked anyone to carry me. I chose a simple lifestyle because it gave me peace, not because I couldn't afford more. Lauren assumed things about me, and I let her. I didn't feel the need to prove myself with statements or screenshots. I thought trust mattered more than displays. I thought being steady was enough. What she never understood was that my silence wasn't weakness. It was a boundary. I had built something solid for myself without noise or approval. It was never meant to be a secret weapon or a surprise reveal. It was just my safety net. That night, when I looked at my phone, it wasn't about showing anyone anything. It was a reminder to myself. I wasn't trapped. I wasn't dependent. I had options. I realized then that I had been judged based on assumptions, not truth. And while I had protected myself financially, I had failed to protect my dignity. That understanding stayed with me long after the screen went dark. The conversation didn't move on. If anything, it got worse. Lauren leaned back in her chair, relaxed, like she had just made a clever point. She laughed and said something about how some people are lucky to marry up. Her tone was playful, but the meaning was clear. A few people smiled. No one corrected her. Her father looked at her and nodded, as if agreeing without words. That small gesture hit harder than anything she said. It told me everything I needed to know about how they all saw me. I wasn't family in that moment. I was a topic. Lauren kept talking, telling stories that painted her as the responsible one, the strong one. She made it sound like I was being carried through life. Each sentence felt carefully chosen. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The room was already on her side. I waited for someone to change the subject. I waited for a pause, a glance, anything. It never came. The silence around her words felt louder than laughter. I could feel my face getting warm, but I kept my expression neutral. I focused on breathing. My thoughts slowed. I stopped trying to understand why she was doing this and accepted that she was. That realization hurt, but it also brought a strange calm. I knew then that whatever this was, it wasn't love. Under the table, I reached for my phone again. My movements were slow and steady. No shaking this time. I unlocked the screen without looking around. No one noticed. They were too busy listening to her speak. As I held the phone, I felt distance grow between me and the table. The voices sounded farther away. I wasn't angry. I wasn't planning anything. I was just done absorbing the weight of other people's opinions. Lauren finished her thought and took a sip of her drink. The moment passed, but something permanent had settled in me. I put the phone back down and looked up. The dinner continued, but I was already somewhere else, quietly stepping away. I looked down at my phone and opened the app. The screen loaded slowly, giving me just enough time to think. When the numbers appeared, they were exactly where I expected them to be. Solid. Steady. Enough. Seeing them didn't make me feel proud or relieved. It made me feel calm. I had always known where I stood financially. I never doubted my choices. The difference now was understanding how little that mattered to the person sitting across from me. The problem was never money. It was how she saw me. I listened to Lauren's voice as she kept talking, confident and comfortable. She wasn't trying to hurt me in that moment. She was being honest. She believed what she was saying. That truth settled heavily in my chest. She didn't love who I actually was. She loved the idea that she was stronger, smarter, and above me. That version made her feel secure. It gave her control. And control had replaced connection. I realized then that no amount of explaining would fix this. Showing her numbers wouldn't change how she treated me. Respect isn't created by proof. It either exists or it doesn't. The noise of the room faded into the background. I wasn't thinking about leaving or confronting anyone. I was thinking about how long I had been shrinking to fit into a space that no longer had room for me. I locked my phone and placed it face down. The moment felt final, even though nothing had been said out loud. I knew I wouldn't see her the same way again. And once that shift happens, there's no going back. The balance on that screen wasn't the important part. What mattered was the clarity it gave me. I wasn't tied to this situation. I wasn't trapped by fear or dependence. I had stayed because I believed in us. That belief was gone now. And sitting there, surrounded by people, I felt a quiet separation begin. Not dramatic. Not angry. Just certain. I waited for a pause in the conversation and quietly pushed my chair back. I didn't rush. I didn't look around for permission. I simply said I needed some air. My voice was calm, steady. No one asked questions. Lauren nodded without really looking at me, already pulled back into the table talk. I stepped outside and let the cool night hit my face. For a moment, I just stood there breathing. There was no anger in me, no urge to prove anything. Just a deep sense of knowing. I had reached the end of something. I didn't go back to the table. I sent a short message saying I'd meet her at home later. Then I drove away. The road was quiet. My mind was clear. I wasn't replaying the night or planning speeches. I was thinking about how tired I was of trying to earn respect from someone who had already withdrawn it. When I got home, the house felt empty even though it was full of memories. I went to the bedroom and opened the closet. I packed slowly. A few clothes. Personal items. Things that mattered. I didn't take much because I didn't need much. There was no dramatic moment. No tears. No shouting. Just decisions being made in silence. I left a note explaining that I needed space and time. I didn't accuse her of anything. I didn't defend myself. I said what I needed and nothing more. As I closed the door behind me, I felt lighter. Not happy, but lighter. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't trying to explain myself or adjust my worth to fit someone else's view. That night wasn't about walking away from a marriage. It was about walking toward myself. And once I made that choice, there was no regret following me into the dark. The first few days passed quietly. I stayed out of her way and focused on settling into a simple routine. I didn't check in. I didn't explain myself. I let time do what words couldn't. Back at the house, reality started to show itself. Payments that had always been handled without discussion were suddenly late. Notices arrived. Small problems piled up quickly. Things that had run smoothly before now needed attention, and Lauren wasn't used to handling them alone. Then came the paperwork. Forms that required signatures. Records that listed names, accounts, and responsibilities. For the first time, she had to actually look at the structure of our life instead of assuming she understood it. What she saw didn't match the story she had been telling herself. Her messages started changing. At first, they were short and confused. She asked where certain things were, why something wasn't working, when I planned to come back. There was no apology yet, just uncertainty. Later, the tone shifted again. The questions became softer. The messages came more often. She said she didn't realize how much I handled. She said things felt overwhelming. She asked if we could talk. I responded politely and briefly. I didn't ignore her, but I didn't rush either. I answered what was necessary and nothing more. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was protecting my space. As days passed, the confidence she once carried faded from her words. She sounded unsure, almost afraid. It became clear that the balance she believed existed was never real. She had leaned more than she knew. I stayed calm through all of it. I didn't feel satisfaction or victory. Just distance. I had already stepped out of the role she assigned me, and I wasn't stepping back in. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It came slowly, piece by piece, as silence filled the gaps I used to cover. And in that quiet, everything became clear for both of us. When we finally met, Lauren looked different. The confidence she once carried so easily was gone. She sat across from me and asked why I had really left. Her voice was firm, but I could hear the strain underneath it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I just spoke honestly. I told her that money was never the issue. I explained that I had always taken care of myself and shared what I could without needing recognition. I told her I never felt the need to prove my worth with numbers. Then I talked about respect. I explained how her words had changed over time and how being treated like a burden had worn me down. I told her that the dinner wasn't just embarrassing, it was final. That was the moment I understood she no longer saw me as her partner. She tried to interrupt, but I calmly continued. I told her I didn't leave because of anger. I left because I saw the truth clearly for the first time. I said that love can't survive where there is contempt. Lauren went quiet. She looked down at her hands and stayed that way for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. She said she didn't mean for it to go that far. She said she was under pressure and wanted approval from her family. I listened, but something had already closed inside me. I told her that seeking approval at the cost of your partner changes everything. Once respect is broken in public, it's hard to rebuild in private. There were no dramatic words at the end. Just silence. She realized then that what she lost wasn't money or comfort, but trust and safety. By the time she understood it, the distance between us was already real. I stood up, wished her well, and left. Calm, clear, and certain. After the confrontation, I made sure everything was final. Papers were signed, accounts were separated, and there were no loose ends. I handled it quietly, without drama, because this wasn't about showing her or anyone else what I had. It was about creating space to live on my own terms. I moved into a new apartment. It wasn't extravagant, just comfortable and peaceful. I arranged it the way I liked, with no one's expectations dictating the choices. I upgraded some things, not to flaunt success, but to make my life smoother, calmer, and free from constant criticism. I focused on routines that made me feel steady, working, exercising, cooking, reading. Each day built a sense of normalcy I hadn't felt in a long time. It was quiet, almost unnoticed by the world, but it was enough for me. For the first time in years, I felt entirely in control of my life. Meanwhile, Lauren's messages stopped. Sometimes I heard from mutual friends that she had been replaying that dinner in her head. She wondered why I left so calmly. She realized that I had never depended on her as she assumed. The respect and trust she thought she controlled were gone. She faced the truth slowly and silently, and it clearly unsettled her. I didn't reach out. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't need to. The real satisfaction wasn't in proving her wrong. It was in walking away from a situation that diminished me and building a life that valued me for who I was. That was quiet, steady, and complete. I often thought about that night at the dinner table, the jokes, the laughter, and the silence. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt clarity. The humiliation she tried to impose had no power over me. I had created my own dignity and carried it forward. In the end, real revenge isn't shouting or proving a point. It's choosing yourself, living with integrity, and stepping away from people who show you who they truly are. I didn't need applause or acknowledgement. I simply needed peace, and I finally had it.